Hi, everyone. Welcome to the NASEO Electricity Committee webinar on the IIJA Grid Resilience Innovation Partnership, or GRIP program, and the overview of that program. While people are trickling in, I want to go over a few housekeeping items and do an introduction. My name is Kirsten Verklas. I'm the Managing Director for the Electricity and Energy Security Programs at the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASEO. And we are the only national nonprofit association for the governor-designated energy officials from each of the 56 states and territories. We were formed by the states in 1986 and facilitate peer learning among state energy officials. We serve as a resource for and about state energy offices. And we also advocate the interest of our members to Congress and federal agencies. Through our committees, we've been supporting the state energy offices on many of the Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, so IIJA or BIL. And we are especially have been working with our members through the NASEO Electricity Committee and the Energy Security Committee, particularly on providing technical assistance to our members on the IIJA Provision 4101D, which provides formula grant funding for grid resilience investments to states, tribes, and territories. And a significant number of state energy offices are leading the state applications for that particular program across the country. Under the IIJA Section 4108, the state energy offices are also leading the updates and developments of state energy security plans, which are an important foundation to determine states' hazards and vulnerabilities, as well as potential mitigation strategies. In addition to 4101D, the IIJA includes additional grid resilience provision, and that's what we hear about today. To address these three of those, the U.S. Department of Energy Grid Deployment Office, GDO, recently released a request for information on the $10.5 billion Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership, or GRIP program. And we're really excited to have this webinar to have DOE outline the components of the GRIP program, and also as an opportunity for the states and other attendees to provide feedback to help refine the funding opportunity announcement that will be made later this year, and to guide the implementation of the funding over the 5 years to enhance grid resilience. Just a note, the comments on the RFI are due by October 14th. Another housekeeping item, we are recording this webinar. And if you have any questions, I would like to invite you to put those in the Q&A box, and we will have ample time at the end of the presentation to go over those. For now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Whitney Muse. She's the Chief of Staff at the Grid Deployment Office after having served as the Chief of Staff for the Office of Electricity. She was most recently a manager in Deloitte's federal energy practice, where she provided policy and regulatory analysis of domestic and international power sector projects. Before that, she worked at the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, NARUC, implementing capacity building programs for energy regulators around the world. So it's very exciting to have you, Whitney. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Kirsten. And I'm glad to be here and to join the NASEO community to talk about the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership Programs. Let me just share my screen and you all should see it momentarily. Dylan has already got me covered. Thank you very much. And so again, here to talk about the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership Programs. You can go to the next slide, Dylan. And a little bit about the Grid Deployment Office, as we are a new office at DOE. We work to provide electricity to everyone everywhere by maintaining and investing in critical generation facilities to ensure resource adequacy and improving and expanding transmission and distribution systems to ensure that all communities have access to reliable and affordable electricity. We do that across 3 divisions: the Power Generation Assistance Division, focusing on keeping clean generation online, principally hydro and nuclear, as well as a Transmission Division that supports all efforts related to transmission deployment, from planning, work on siting and permitting, as well as transmission financing. And lastly, the Grid Modernization Division oversees activities that prevent outages and enhance the resilience of the electric grid. To talk about the grid resilience funding through the BIL, Kirsten mentioned at the top the grid resilience formula grants that I know NASEO is working with many of the state energy offices on. It offers $2.5 billion over the 5 years of the infrastructure bill, and the applications are open until March 31st of 2023 for the current FY22 funding. The discussion for the next hour will be about the 3 programs that you see listed on the bottom under the GRIP program. These are all the competitive funding for grid resilience that we offer at the competitive grant funding for the grid resilience and reliability that we have at DOE. So the grid resilience industry grants, smart grid grants, and the grid innovation program. They're all contained in the RFI, as well as a draft FOA that is open for comment through next Friday, October 14th at 5 p.m. You can go to the next one. We're releasing them as one funding opportunity, but have opportunities for applications to various parts of them, as they're different eligible entities and different types of projects that we're looking to support under them. As I mentioned, the RFI is due, the comments are due next Friday, the 14th, on both the request for information and the questions we have there, as well as the full draft funding announcement that's available. We expect to release the FOA to have it open for applications in mid-November for FY22 and FY23 funding, which is over $4 billion. Timing wise, so timing is important. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to the NASEO community today and to get some feedback here. The written responses to the RFI are due next Friday. We will take the feedback into consideration, but don't plan to publish the full breadth of the submissions. The potential applicants are also not required to submit comments. They're open for feedback. If you're interested specifically in applying for funding under this program, you'll need to wait for the fall release, which will happen later this fall. And then in terms of the application process, DOE is going to request concept papers first. As you can see laid out in the draft FOA, those concept papers will cover one topic area, and we'll talk about the 3 topic areas shortly. And then based on review of those concept papers, DOE will encourage a subset to submit a full application. Those concept papers are intended to provide DOE insight into the project and the impact of it, and a higher level overview of it, meant to be 12 or 15, I believe it's a 15-page limit right now in the draft FOA, to be able to quickly assess it without having to go through the full requirements of an application. So first step of concept papers, then those are a subset will be recommended for full applications. All right, so we bundled these 3 bill grid resilience related provisions in part to address 3 broad challenges, looking to transform community, regional, interregional, and national resilience, including consideration of future shifts in generation and load. Also looking to catalyze and leverage private sector and non-federal private capital for impactful technology and infrastructure deployment on the grid. And lastly, to advance community benefits. In this RFI, we ask questions about implementation strategy of overall for GRIP, as well as the individual topic areas, DOE's approach to community benefits, including community engagement, quality jobs, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, along with Justice 40. We also ask questions about the Build America, Buy America requirements. The community benefits plan is something that, if you've seen a number of other DOE competitive funding, you will see as a common thread throughout, where the applicants are required to provide information around how the project that they're proposing will advance community and labor engagement, how it will invest in the American workforce, how it will move forward with the overall diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals, as well as how is it in line with the Justice 40 initiative, where 40% of the benefits of the overall investments made throughout the overall benefits benefit those communities. Digging in a bit to the 3 programs within the GRIP program. The first is the Competitive Utility and Industry Grid Resilience Grants. I know that you all are familiar with the state, tribal, and territorial grid resilience grants. This is the other half of them. And so in this $2.5 billion program, which is $500 per year for each of the 5 years, it provides funding to grid operators, storage operators, electricity generators, transmission owners or operators, distribution providers, and fuel suppliers to prioritize projects that generate the greatest community benefit in reducing the likelihood and consequence of disruptive events. There are some nuances to this program, which is that it's capped at the amount that the eligible entity has spent in the previous 3 years on its hardening efforts. There is a small utility set aside for those that are selling no more than 4 million megawatt hours of electricity per year. The small utilities must match a third of the grant amounts received, and at least 30% of the awards must go to small utilities. For the large utilities, or the non-small utilities in this case, the cost match would be 100% of the award. So there's, again, you all are quite familiar with the state, tribal, and territorial grid resilience grants. The resilience investments allowed under this competitive grant are the exact same list, ranging from utility pole management, vegetation management, monitoring and control technologies, as well as other weatherization technologies, potentially replacement of overhead conductors, relocation, as well as hardening of power lines, facilities, and substations. There's a couple of key areas that are called out that are not allowed under this provision: construction of a new electric generating facility, construction of a large-scale battery storage facility that is not used for enhancing system adaptive capacity, or cybersecurity investments. Next slide. This next program is the Smart Grid Grants. This is one that was previously funded under the Recovery Act, which awarded $3.5 billion of grants during FY29 and 2010. The infrastructure bill version of the Smart Grid Investment Grant Program takes what was the eligible activities during the ARA version and expands it. And these are grants broadly to support the deployment of technologies to enhance grid flexibility. The eligibility is quite open to institutions of higher education, for-profit entities, nonprofit entities, as well as state and local government entities and tribal nations. The goals of this and objectives of this Smart Grid grants are we're focusing on increasing transmission capacity, looking to mitigate wildfires, as well as load management and electrification of edge devices, really looking to manage the charging of the grid infrastructure and autonomous control. And lastly, to incorporate secure communications and cybersecurity. I jumped into the description without actually talking about the funding, which is important. $3 billion for this provision overall through the infrastructure bill, which equates to $600 million per year for each of the 5 years. And in the first FOA that we'll be putting out this fall, we combine FY22 and 23 for up to $1.2 billion. Next slide. A little bit more on the priority investment areas for the Smart Grid grants. When we talk about increasing transmission capacity, really looking to get more out of the existing system. And so looking at deploying grid enhancing technologies such as dynamic line ratings or flow control devices and other tools to help improve system efficiency and reliability. Really looking for deploying of technologies that improve the visibility of the electrical system to grid operators, looking to enhance secure communications and data flow between distribution components on the grid, investments in optical ground wire, dark fiber, operational fiber, and wireless broadband communications, looking to aggregate and integrate distributed energy resources and other grid edge devices to really help provide system benefits. And then enhancing the interoperability and data architecture of the system to support the two-way flow of both electric power and analytics back and forth between the system operator and consumers, and anticipating and mitigating the impacts of extreme weather or natural disasters on grid resiliency. The third program within the GRIP is the Grid Innovation Program. This is a $5 billion program, $1 billion per year for the 5 years of the infrastructure bill. And in this first FOA, we'll be funding up to $2 billion. Has broad applicability where it's looking to demonstrate innovative approaches to transmission, distribution, and storage to harden and enhance resilience and reliability, as well as demonstrating new approaches to enhance grid resilience through the states. Eligible entities for this are quite specific, given that it's focused on transmission, distribution, and storage infrastructure. That's a state, a combination of 2 or more states, an Indian tribe, a unit of local government, or a public utility commission. This is a 50% minimum cost share, the same as the Smart Grid Grant Program. Next slide. There we go. And so the primary objectives for this Grid Innovation Program are to ensure reliable grid operations, to improve overall grid resilience, to enhance collaboration between and among those eligible entities, as well as private and public sector owners and operators of the grid, to contribute to the decarbonization of the electricity sector and broader energy system, and to provide enhanced system value, improve current and future system cost effectiveness, and deliver economic benefits. The areas of interest for applications here are transmission capacity enhancements, advanced distribution grid assets and functionality, as well as combined system approaches that include transmission, distribution, and storage, demonstrating innovative approaches. Again, when we talk about current status and timeline, the RFI right now is open both for your feedback and for comments, as well as the draft funding opportunity announcement that includes all of the details around these three programs and what we would be looking for the full applications later this fall. The RFI comments and your feedback on the draft FOA are due by next Friday, the 14th at 5 p.m. via email to gdorfi@hq.doe.gov. And again, we'll plan to publish release the FOA rather later this fall. Lastly, in part because the Grid Deployment Office is new and there's a lot of overlapping and intersecting grid and transmission programs, both at GDO and within the department, we've stood up recently the Grid and Transmission Programs Conductor, which acts as a clearinghouse for GDO's transmission and grid resilience financing programs. Within this, you can find information on the grid and transmission programs that are funded through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as existing DOE transmission and grid programs in the Loan Programs Office or the Western Area Power Administration's Transmission Infrastructure Program. And that website is energy.gov/GDO/conductor. And thanks for putting that in the chat, Kirsten. To contact us, you see the email here again for the RFI submissions, GDO RFI@hq.doe.gov, and where all of us that work on the GRIP team are regularly monitoring that. There's also here the website for energy.gov/GDO/join our team. We are growing this office within GDO, and if you're interested in learning more and potentially pursuing opportunities, we'd love to have you as well. And with that, I think we've gone through the slides here and can take a number of questions that are starting to come in the Q&A, and I'll certainly answer some of them, but can also lean on the other team members that work on the Grid Resilience and Innovation Program as well. There's a couple questions about what slides we made available, and yes, we can share them with Kirsten to distribute them after the call. Sure, so to clarify the difference between the Smart Grid grants and the Grid Innovation Program, the Smart Grid grants are really focused on deploying technology on the grid, and so there is a focus on getting more out of the existing system. The Grid Innovation Program is the one program that's really targeted towards new transmission, distribution, and storage infrastructure. And so if you're looking for a new build, the Grid Innovation Program would, particularly for new transmission, would be the program to focus on. There's certainly considerable overlap between all of the three programs, and part of what we put out in the RFI and in the draft FOA is information to allow you to see where we've identified priorities, for you all to see what the requirements are for the various provisions, and then identify which makes sense for your situation scenario. The other difference between the Smart Grid grants and the Grid Innovation Program is the eligible entities. The Smart Grid grants are open to states, to state and local governments, to tribal governments, to higher ed institutions, to nonprofits, to for-profit entities. It's open quite widely for those that are interested in taking advantage of the Smart Grid grant program. The Grid Innovation Program is limited to what was defined as the eligible entities in the infrastructure law. And so that's states, either as individual or as a group of states, units of local governments, the public utility commissions, and tribal government, an Indian tribe. And so that's another key difference between the Smart Grid grants and the Grid Innovation Program. All right, there is a question to show the timeline slide that I think we can certainly put that back up again. For another question about the Grid Innovation Program and eligibility. So again, I went through that list of eligible entities, one state, a group of states. unit of local government, tribe, a public utility commission, we do anticipate that there will be partnerships between those eligible entities and developers of transmission or storage or distribution projects. However, the entity that submits the application to DOE needs to be among that list of eligible entities for the Grid Innovation Program. Sorry, I'm just reading a question that's a little bit longer. While I'm reading this next question, Dylan just put the timelines slide back up on the screen for that, as that was one of the questions. Okay. If a state signs on to an RFI for the 401(o)(3) funding opportunity that a utility has produced, what, if any, level of commitment is there on behalf of the state? And so for the 401(o)(3) or the Grid Innovation Program, again, that's one where if you are applying, it is the state, it is groups of states, it is a tribe, it is a PUC or a unit of local government that's applying. It's not the utility. And so the partnership would need to be in conjunction with the state, and they would be the ones submitting it, not the utility. Are eligible entities other than states able to combine on an application under 401(o)(3) for the Grid Innovation Program? I feel like I do keep answering about the eligible entities, but there's a number of questions. And it is the only one that they called out as groups is groups of states. And so a state could be individual or a group, but the PUCs, the tribes, and the unit of local governments were indicated as singularly. The differences between 401(o)(1)D and GRIP, and so you all, like I said, know the state, tribal, and territorial grid resilience grants quite well. They are formula funded, and so they are not competitive. We have identified the funding available in the FY22 cycle for all states, territories, and tribes. It is meant to support the grid resilience efforts in the states and in the territories and tribes, and meant to be additive and to enhance and help with hardening efforts. The competitive grid resilience grants, that's specifically the first program that I talked about, they have the same overall goals and certainly have the same types of investments that can be made. There are some additional limitations on the utility side for the competitive grid resilience grants, where they're limited to what they've spent on the past 3 years of funding. And so really looking to provide grant dollars to utilities and other transmission operators, distribution operators that have made resilient and hardening investments in their system recently, and so that the grant dollars are additive and ideally those projects that provide the greatest community benefits. Overall, the GRIP includes 2 additional programs that are much broader than the grid resilience and hardening funding that 401(o)(1)D is limited to, and so it provides broader opportunities for grid investments in potentially new transmission, distribution, or storage infrastructure, as well as more widely deploying technologies on the grid. Okay, there's a question if DOE could develop a single table that identifies the key differences between each program and the eligible entities and part of that is within the conductor website. I know Kirsten put that in the chat, and that does lay out the differences between the funding for the grid and allows you, if it's not there yet, it's coming soon, a more kind of an opportunity to walk through and choose your own adventure in a sense, and saying, you know, where you are now, if you're a state, if you're a transmission developer, if you're a tribe, and help to guide you a bit to the grid funding that's available both within GDO and a bit more about the DOE funding for the grid and the transmission overall.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit more context around that in particular, I think the conductor website was an attempt to try to aggregate a lot of the opportunities available to the variety of eligible entities as a part of that. So that has been up on the website for a couple of weeks now to provide a comprehensive view of the various grid and transmission financing opportunities. But as Whitney alluded to, we are trying to make that a more interactive opportunity overall. So you can kind of go through and be able to click through and see different opportunities depending on what your needs are as a part of that. So bear with us as we get the comm side of that, but that is on its way. So thank you for that question.
Okay. All right. Another one question is, are there estimates for the size of funding expected for each individual project that will be funded for the opportunity? And there are estimates in the RFI. There also, that is one of the questions that we ask, is particularly around, we have made our best assessments of the size of the projects and the size of the awards that we think will get the most funding out of this. But we have also offered questions in the RFI to get your feedback on that. And for the range, I was going to pull it up because it's actually not in the slide deck, but I believe, and Colin, keep me honest here, I think for the grid resilience grants, for the competitive ones, it's a range of 50 million to, I think here, 50 to 250 million. Sorry, I do want to get those correct. And so I want to hand it off to someone that does have those numbers top of mind. Otherwise, I'll circle back to that question.
I think for grid resilience, it is 100 million. For the grid innovation, is that what you're talking about? That's 50 to 250. I'm sorry.
There we go. Yes, the 50 to 250 million for the grid innovation program, and then the range for the smart grid grants was 30 million for the awards. There we go. So for the grid innovation program, the main purposes are focused on reliability and resilience and new capacity to a lesser extent. Would a transmission project focus on enabling new generation, which also happens to provide reliability and resilience benefits, still fit the purpose of the program? The answer is yes. The key is that it does also need to be able to provide reliability and resilience benefits. And as you demonstrate that, or as you explain that program, the resilience and reliability benefits of the project need to be highlighted as well. Will funds be available to help with pre-construction and stakeholder engagement? A common hurdle to cross is ensuring all the right people are engaged for project to advance, primarily engaging utilities early on for wide scope penetration of DER. I again want to point towards, this is one of the things that we also asked about in the RFI is potential phasing of funding. Right now, the way that it's structured, the program dollars are for deployment. But again, we're looking for feedback, and one of the areas we've asked in the RFI is there a structured or phased approach where we are looking at these larger scale grid projects that it makes sense to have some of the earlier funding available for some of the earlier pre-construction or stakeholder engagement or work to get all the right parties together to be able to really successfully deploy these larger scale infrastructure projects. I'm going to summarize this question around for the state energy offices that don't typically apply directly to federal funding to execute specific projects, that there's a significant amount of time that must go into defining the priorities and then reaching out to industry to learn of potential projects, and then as well as time to develop the project ideas and teams. And this is a question around the timeline of the actual application process, with the intent to open the applications this fall to have concept papers developed shortly after the application window opens. So part of the answer around timing, I would say, is that this is the first round of the funding that will happen this fall. We will run the solicitation for these projects multiple times because we have 5 years of funding through the infrastructure bill. And so part of putting out the RFI this summer, as well as a draft funding opportunity announcement, was to give as much visibility to what DOE is asking, as well as to the sense that even if you're not ready for this first round this fall, there will be additional funding opportunities for these same programs. And that again gives you the opportunity to do that type of stakeholder engagement and getting a team together, potentially not for this fall, but for the next round of funding. Will any of the presenters be at the NASEO conference next week? I will not, but speaking will be Maria Robinson, the director of the office. I do believe Dylan, I'm not sure if you're also traveling to Florida as well.
I'm not, but I do think there are a handful of other folks from our team that will be there. And because I know there's probably a number of questions on the formula grants, our staff that are leading that should be there as well. So they'll be able to, if you have questions on that particular side, we'll be able to answer that in detail too next week.
Yes, and please see me if you would like an introduction. Joe Palladino and Tom King will be on a panel talking about 4101D, but also a little bit about the GRIP program. And as Dylan mentioned, Maria Robinson will also be at the conference. So please reach out to me if you need any introductions or have any questions.
So I think I answered the question of the difference between the GRIP program and the formula grants. I think it may just be an additional question, but if there's key clarification points, please let me know or continue to answer that question, or to provide an additional question if there's things around the state, tribal, and territorial grid resilience grants that are formula funding, as well as the competitive grid resilience grants that are part of GRIP, if there's key things that there are questions. There's a clarifying question on eligible entities partnering, which is specific to the Grid Innovation Program, which is, could a state be the applicant, but have a tribe or local government as a sub and project partner? The answer is yes to having them as a project partner. It's just that the eligible entity is the one that has to formally be the prime and apply, and that has to be state, group of states, PUC, unit of local government, or a tribe. Are individual projects eligible for grants from multiple programs if they fit within the criteria of multiple programs? So you will need to decide which of the 3 topic areas or 3 programs that you're going to apply to as part of the application process. When you submit the concept papers, you'll need to submit them to a single program, a single one of these 3 provisions. You can't submit one paper to cover, if it's something for transmission, upgrading the transmission or reconductoring transmission lines and deploying GETs. It can't be something that you're then submitting one single paper to all of these. You'll need to look at the requirements for all of the programs and decide which makes the most sense in terms of the application, the program rather that best fits what you're looking to deploy. All right. I think the questions are coming in. Not sure if there's any others that we want to answer online. I know we've still got some time here.
Whitney, one of the questions that we received more broadly on some of this is on resilience benefits and how to measure some of the benefits for resilience and reliability. And I don't know, this has been a very hot topic under 4101D, and I was wondering if there was also similarly kind of a conversation under the GRIP program on what kind of metrics are desired by DOE.
Absolutely. And so particularly for the competitive grid resilience grant program, so 4101C, that has the same requirements, we're also looking at the resilience metrics aspect. We are looking at, we are required, DOE is required to submit a report on the resilience investments made under that competitive grid resilience program every 2 years, but we also have questions in the RFI around what metrics make the most sense with what's available and something that's readily measurable, that's not going to be overly burdensome. And it also is part of the technical assistance work that's going on to support the work under 4101, both sides of it. That I know that many of you have been in conversation with Joe Palladino and Tom King. We're also looking to do more work on our side, working with the national labs, working with other entities around helping to clarify around the resilience investments. And so to the extent that you all have thoughts rather about resilience metrics, we will happy to hear them and submit them through the RFI and the comment process next week. I know that you all have maybe been doing a bit more thought on these than others, given that you've got the head start with the work under 4101D. Let's see. All right. Can I describe the concept paper description? What am I expecting for that? So part of it is it's laid out in the FOA, and the intent of the concept papers overall is to provide DOE an overview of the program such that we understand how it's applicable to the program aspects that you're applying to, as well as to meet how it aligns to the broad criteria that DOE has laid out. And so it's also intended to allow, both on the applicant side, instead of needing to complete the full application, the DOE would require, which is quite extensive, as laid out in the draft FOA, an opportunity to provide essentially a first stage in the application process, the 12 to 15 pages of, what's the impact of the project? What are you looking to achieve? How does it align to the goals of the provision of the program, to give us a sense to be able to assess it? And as we do a comparison an assessment among the other concept papers, there are criteria for the concept papers laid out in the draft funding opportunity announcement. We also, of course, are asking for feedback through the RFI process to the approach to applications with the concept papers and full applications. And so that's what we are looking at for the concept papers. There's a question here around the microgrid aspect of 40101, which impacts both the competitive grid resilience grants that are part of GRIP, as well as the 40101D state, tribal, and territorial grid resilience programs. We are actually going to put out new guidance quite soon and an updated FAQ around that microgrids are eligible activities, but around clarification for the question of generation, given the prohibition for no new generation within 40101. And so don't want to get ahead of what we're finalized internally, and that will certainly be clarified in the final FOA that comes out this fall related to the competitive grid resilience grant investments. I think with that, I've answered the questions. Can I speak to NEPA requirements that may apply to projects receiving funding that otherwise wouldn't apply to a project? I'm not sure what's being asked here, and if one of the other panelists wants to jump in, that's fine. I think I may need a little bit more on the question here, on the NEPA requirements question that was asked.
So I'll take a guess at clarifying, and if the questioner wants to add anything. But my interpretation is this is a project that wouldn't necessarily fall under NEPA requirements, but for federal funding. And what does that look like? I'm not sure if I'm correct in that, but the short answer to that is I believe, and Whitney, others, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the NEPA requirements will apply to any projects that are funded through this.
Colin, you are correct. NEPA will be evaluated for all federal projects, but some projects we will do a categorical exclusion depending on the scope of the project, and it will be evaluated whether there is any environmental impact and a categorical exclusion applies, or if we need to do further analysis.
On Grid Innovation Program, one of the questions in the RFI asked about best practices to get input and coordination with other organizations in developing and submitting proposals. Will DOE share these best practices when the final FOA is posted? It's challenging to consider the scope of the coordination that is expected from a capacity standpoint this fall with so many other programs happening. We're certainly looking, and I think this is not necessarily specific to GRIP, but also just DOE wide, and thinking about coordination between a number of these programs and how to coordinate with other organizations in developing and submitting proposals. So I think that's not unique not something that we're working on just within the Grid Deployment Office, but a number of the other offices in DOE that have bill funding and now IRA funding that are looking to do better coordination and help provide guidance where we can around coordination with other organizations as they're looking to submit proposals. I know that the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations is also doing a lot of that work at DOE as well, and can certainly look to take this back internally at DOE and see what makes sense in terms of putting it forward in terms of where some of the best practices that we've learned across the offices at DOE. Okay, there is a NEPA follow-up. Actually, that's a clarification, Pat, to your comment, which is wanting to make sure that they understood your comment. Will a list of projects available for a categorical exclusion be released, or will all projects be analyzed under NEPA to determine whether a categorical exclusion will apply under the NEPA requirements?
So, apologies, it will depend on the project. Each project will have to be evaluated for NEPA. And if it is a communications project that doesn't disturb any land area, it's just adding a data center or information technology, that would be evaluated that a categorical exclusion may apply for that. Other projects may require an EIS or an EA. So it will be very project specific, per to Colin's point.
I don't see any more questions from the audience, but just a final plug. If you have any more burning questions or comments, please put them in the Q&A chat in the next minute or so. I wanted to ask one clarification while you're all thinking to Whitney, and it said on one of the slides that this is, and I can't remember if it was for all three programs or just one, but it was for FY22 and 23. And so just to clarify that it's for both years together, which is sort of what we've seen on the 4101D side. So just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
Yeah, so for the FOA that we put out for comment, as well as what we are intending to release this fall, for each of the three programs, we're putting out the funding under FY22 and FY23. So that combined gives us about $4.2 billion across these three programs. So for the Competitive Grid Resilience Grants, it's $1 billion of funding. For the Smart Grid Grants, it is $1.2 billion of funding. And for the Grid Innovation Program, it's $2 billion of funding. And so that's because we're taking the first 2 years, 2 fiscal years of funding that's available and putting it out in this first FOA.
Great. And then one other question, apologies if that is hidden in the RFI and I missed it, but the period of performance for some of these projects, will that be spanning over the 5 years of the IIJA, or will that be longer than the lifespan of the IIJA, or can you speak to some of that timeline?
Sure. So right now we've got the draft timeline that's laid out in the FOA right now is 5 years for the Grid Resilience Grants and for the Smart Grid Grants, with a longer 8-year timeline for the Grid Innovation Program. We recognize it'll take some time for these projects to get fully developed and deployed, and we also recognize that there's supply chain constraints in the grid space in particular that will make it challenging to fully execute them. So that's the proposed timelines for those for the projects right now.
Great. And I don't see any more questions coming in, so we don't have to keep you on the line just to make the hour full. But I wanted to really say that we, from the NASEO side and the state energy offices, really appreciate all your help with this, not just on the 4101D, but now the GRIP program. It's really, really nice to have you come on, explain it, and have that rapid fire of questions and answer all the questions live, which I know is challenging. And we are looking forward to continuing this great relationship and with the GRIP program and on 4101D. So I really appreciate all your support and help and willingness to answer all the questions. And with that, I just want to make one plug for the state energy offices that are on the line. We do have a standing call every month from the NASEO side, which used to be 4101D, but has now morphed into more grid resilience writ large with the GRIP program included. If you are not signed up for that, and if you'd like to sign up, I will put my email in the chat. You can send me an email. For right now, this is only for state energy offices or anybody at the state that has been designated a lead agency for 4101D. but send me an email if you'd like to be part of that. One final check on the Q&A. I don't see anything. So with that, I will just have any final word from DOE.
No, thank you all for answering the many questions and for attending. We look forward to receiving your feedback via the RFI by the comment deadline next Friday, and look forward to full applications in the fall once the FOA opens. And I'm sure we'll be in contact starting at the NASEO conference next week.
Great. Yes, we look forward to seeing some of your colleagues there. And with that, thank you so much and have a good rest of the day.